Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title, it's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we kind of have a stalemate.
You'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
Right.
or the man is being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
WESN.
Welcome to Talking Points, and it's been a while. Of course, a lot has happened over the weekend. Internationally, things seemingly escalated. And one of the things that I would like to just point out about the whole Iran nuclear situation, as much as it was kicked off by Israel, we got the latest exclamation point by the United States. A lot of people might be thinking, this could be an escalation. How much worse can things get? First things first, that assumes that the situation was not technically bad from the jump. And when I say from the jump, I don't mean Israel attacking Iran, I mean from even before, given the intricacies of the politics as well as the various agendas of the nation states involved. Now, at the end of the day, this situation is interesting because while the narrative with regards to Israel operations in Gaza has remained the same, one thing to note is how the split in opinion over the US strike is not along the same lines. And therein begs the question, exactly what is the motivation for various states for having varying opinions, with some nations applauding it, some nations, some that you might not even think, potentially are okay with it. The question remains, who wants to see Iran with a nuclear weapon? And do you think the world would be a better place because of it? And if the answer is yes, I would argue, why don't you just move to Iran then? Just say it. That said, I don't necessarily think a regime change is going to happen anytime soon. The situation is far more complex than that, nor do I think that that would be a good thing to destabilize a country the size of Iran in the region. The problem is, at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily going to say Israel and the US dug a hole for themselves. They found a hole, but they don't necessarily have a way to improve things. Now, with that said, let's move on from the international stuff. And let me just mention a few smaller things locally before we go into today's daily review. First of all, I don't like to speak about each and every murder because to some extent emotionally it's draining. And on an academic level or with regards to a newsworthiness level, there isn't always much new to add to the overall conversation of crime by just mentioning every murder. And arguably, throughout the history of our media industry, you know, some people will complain, and throughout the history of media period, will complain that, you know, news media, media houses are trying to cash in on other people's tragedy and suffering by only bringing up murder and crime, murder and crime. And there was a point in time where our media did that, and I think they realized to be responsible in the long run, they couldn't just keep doing that. But one of the murders that I do want to highlight is the prison officer who got shot. Now, one of the reports, I believe, is trying to ascribe the motivation with regards to something that happened in the prison concerning a visitor. I believe it might have been a female family member who was looking to visit an inmate in the prison, and something went wrong there. All right, I've been told we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue with the conversation. Stay tuned. This is Dr. Manada Belias, and we'll be right back after this.
Feeling drained? Struggling to keep up? It's time to take control of your wellness. On this episode of Wellness Unlocked, we're diving into the key nutrients your body needs for all-day energy and balance. With 100% or more of your daily essential vitamins, plus added chromium to support healthy blood sugar, this is complete wellness in a single soft gel. Join us as we uncover how small changes can make a big impact on your health. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore Color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
And we're back on talking about WSN. Apologies for that. Now, with that said, picking up where I left off, I was speaking about the murder of the prison's officer. Well, no, not the murder, the attempted murder. There was a, I guess you could say, a news report that had to confirm that no, I believe he's still alive in the hospital. As of the last report, he has not necessarily died yet. That said, one of the questions that I think at some point we as a society need to really ask is, what is it about the prison service that sees such a high level of criminal attacks against its members? Now, to some extent, the prison service is calling for its officers to be granted FULs. Will that solve the situation? I don't necessarily have a problem with it, right? Because to some extent, if we have an issue giving FULs to prison officers, maybe those gentlemen shouldn't be prison officers. If you have something with regards to a background check or something in their profile or psychological testing that says maybe that person shouldn't have a gun, well, then in that case, maybe that person should be a corrections officer. So, assuming that mistakes were not made with the selection of prison officers, I don't have an issue, right, in general, with prison officers having private firearms to defend themselves once they're off duty, because I would imagine they don't have any sort of capacity to have firearms with them outside of prison, which means potentially just their commute from work, which will be relatively predictable, would be a vector by which one could be attacked. Now, and let's not forget, a deputy commissioner of prisons was attacked one morning. I believe it was 2 years ago at this point. What is it about the prison service that invites such reckless behavior that other protective services doesn't seem to invite? Is it that they are uncorruptible? It doesn't seem as though even the members believe that, because they were saying, don't just investigate us, investigate the senior officers as well. Now, as I was saying, the situation, an anonymous source, I believe, they didn't name it, they just said prison sources, believe the attack may have been linked to a failed visit at the Port of Spain prison last week, where, well, they say that prison officials said a female relative of an inmate at the maximum security prison where the officer was stationed had an altercation with an officer leading to the cancellation of her visit. Not entirely sure if it's the maximum security at Golden Grove versus Port of Spain. Regardless, it doesn't even necessarily mention the fact on whether or not the officer who was attacked was involved in said altercation. So then it begs the question, what else possibly is there in this situation? How bad did it get? I'm not necessarily saying that it was the officer's fault. It could have been the female family member's fault. It could have been another officer that did something that they should not have done. Or maybe they were doing their job and this reprisal is because whoever did not get their way. We don't know. But again, this whole situation, we have to ask ourselves now. We don't see this kind of thing happening to any other protective service. Is it solely because they don't have personal firearms? Will that magically solve the issue? I'm not entirely sure it would, but I can't say that it wouldn't either. Is it that, well, we know, similar to our maritime borders, the prison service seemingly has an issue guarding its own walls from contraband. And at times, every now and then, you will hear a prison officer is being arrested, charged, or suspected of aiding and abetting smuggling contraband into the prison. Now, you don't necessarily see Coast Guard officers being attacked like this, but ironically, it could be a situation where the officers who are trying to do their job are, to some extent, kind of left out to dry by the corrupt ones that may or may not exist. And to what extent are they potentially involved? There's a lot of informal policing in our protective services, which then leaves us vulnerable to a lot of deliberate rule breaking and corruption as an indirect consequence. And to what degree now? Do we really have a handle on that? Because with regards to the prison service, I don't think anybody thinks the service itself is in a healthy situation. And to what extent has that compromised itself? And then, of course, when you actually get a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout trying to do the job the right way, they are the nail that sticks up that rhetorically will inevitably get hammered down. Sometimes by the system, sometimes by their superiors, and in the case of the prison service, it seems sometimes by criminals. And it makes the next part of the equation of what I wanted to talk this morning all the more complicated. Because the Commissioner of Police, there's an article in the news there that points out his experience, and it paints the Commissioner in a very good professional light. And probably 9 times out of 10, it would be sufficient to give me supreme confidence that he could do the job. But there is a minor caveat given the specific circumstances our law enforcement situation finds itself in. Because, according to the report, the new Commissioner of Police apparently has, this is how it is framed, an impressive investigative record in tracking down terrorists who left TNT to fight for ISIS in Syria, dismantling Chinese narco-trafficking operations and other transnational criminal operations. This is all according to top-ranking special branch officers. But here's the problem with that. To what extent do TNT nationals who went to Syria to fight for ISIS and Chinese narco-traffickers and other transnational criminals, but they can't necessarily, they're not mentioning any other ethnicity by name, which means that they're not necessarily mentioning any other transnational criminal enterprise. Because how many of us think, when we think drug lord in this country, we think of, they do exist, but how many of us bring up Chinese narco-traffickers to the forefront? How many of us think, hey, yes, all these gangs are completely run by the Chinese. All of the illegal money in this country, it's by the Chinese gangsters. They are Chinese gangsters. But like I said, ask yourself, when you think of the crime in this country, do you think that it's being run from China, or being run from Chinese immigrants, or being run by Chinese gangs? So, with that said, what's interesting is they also say this is the first intelligence officer to lead the service. And I get it, he might be a great intelligence officer. The trick is, what is that going to do? What in his experience says that he will effectively go after 2 or maybe even 3 major areas that to some degree is the foundation of all major crime in this country? 1, the non-Chinese drug lords, including gang leaders and other mafia types, some of which one could argue are embedded in the framework of our very society. Then there is political corruption. It's very easy to avoid political corruption if you're worried about Chinese criminals and TNT terrorists going to Syria. And finally, the police corruption, because I was just speaking about the prison service. Well, we might not see criminal gangs looking to attack police officers to the same extent. But generally speaking, it is an open secret that there is some amount of corruption in the police service. And by some amount, we mean it is to the level by which it probably impacts the capacity to deal with the criminals. There's the famous story of a gangster being escorted out of a search cordon, set up to find and arrest him, and yet he was escorted out of it in a police car. Not just by police, in the police car. Now, and potentially it was done in such a blatant way, because I don't think he was hidden for that story to come out. What will this new commissioner be able to do about that? And I'm not saying it to say he's incapable. These are some tall mountains that his predecessors were not able to scale, were not able to overcome. Just about all of his predecessors. Because when you think about the news cycle going back 7, 8, 9, 10 years more, how many drug lords, how many political corruption cases have been successfully prosecuted to its conclusion? How many corrupt police officers? To what extent will this commissioner be able to pierce through our gray and blue wall and somehow circumvent the one squad, one song? Because if you can't at least You don't have to solve everything overnight, but you have to begin to treat with these things if you want to be taken seriously with regards to fighting against crime. And dare I say, police corruption, to whatever degree that it exists, probably is the first one. But I don't know. We have to wait and see. He has done a good job, but he has done a good job potentially by avoiding the key areas upon which most of our crime is built upon. How many Venezuelan drug lords or gangsters he got in? How many arms shipments? Maybe he has. To some extent, to be fair, they did say they can't necessarily give out details of what he's done because they have to protect sources and methods. And I can appreciate that. But the flip side is, you can't blame me for asking questions about what's not said in the informal, write-up of his resume. Now, there's an article in one of the other daily newspapers, this is The Guardian, yesterday. It's with regards to the pharmaceutical industry, right? Apparently, the Private Pharmacy Association has been advised by the Fair Trade Commission that there may be sufficient grounds for members to submit formal complaints regarding potential breaches of the Fair Trading Act. Now, to some extent, I'm not going to pretend and say I understand the intricacies of what's going on within the pharmaceutical industry in the country. All I'll say is this. I have not necessarily been able to get like a good interview with anybody directly involved on air or have a good conversation on the topic. But I have been hearing things over the last couple of years, 3 to 4 years. Every now and then, something comes up, somebody I know that either is in the medical field, works in a pharmacy, is part of an organization, and they haven't been able to give me a lot of details, but there's a lot of questions with regards to the pharmaceutical industry and how things are going. To the point where I just think, look, something is wrong here. And of course, price and medications is one of those things where a lot of people at various times, but including now, and availability of certain drugs, including now, they have been a concern for the last couple of years. They are a concern right now as far as I'm aware, especially given what's going on with the government. The pharmaceutical industry seems like there's a lot of Wild West stuff happening. And look, part of it is the industry, which is supposed to be governed by the fact that a doctor writes a prescription, you go to the pharmacist and you get said prescription. We have a lot of self-declared doctors writing themselves a lot of informal prescriptions in this country. But that's just one aspect of it. Then, of course, it goes into uncompetitive practices and hoarding or whatever with regards to how these pharmacies conduct themselves as businesses. But the problem is, it's one thing to kind of have business strategies when you're a restaurant or a retailer. It's another thing to have certain business practices when you're a pharmacy or a medical or a medicine supplier. So I'm just saying, the whole situation, every time I hear something about pharmaceuticals in the country, it's never good. And I don't know enough to really put it all together, but I will say this is something that the public should keep its eye on and should demand, I think at this point, more clarity, the government maybe to look into whatever it is that's going on there. And finally, I'll close this segment at least with, well, the report on the Nikwan explosion was given out, was laid in Parliament. It's led to a lot of back and forth between the government and opposition, which I believe is completely unnecessary. There was an issue between the House Leader and the Opposition Chief Whip with regards to Dr. Rudolph Munila's speaking time, and which it seemed like a non-issue. I'm not entirely sure exactly why. Mr. Parra said he would speak until conclusion. The Chief Whip then said, Marvin Gonzalez then said, no, we agreed 15 minutes. And then Mr. Parrat had to say, Minister of Public Utilities, Minister Parrat, sorry, that his intention is to be below 15 minutes. Like, I like that whole exchange, I don't know what it was for. One of the things that bothers me is time and time again, former Energy Minister Stuart Young apparently is pointing out the fact, was NICWAN consulted? And to some extent, I have to ask, why do they have to be consulted? Your own government decided not to continue to supply them with gas. So it's not as though this is impacting NICWAN's capacity to operate commercially, because they're not operating commercially. That's point number one. Point number two, a man died. Point number three, a judge said, or rather, let me just say, a judge disagreed with you, said it was within the public's interest to lay the report. Now, given the fact that you have judicial precedent on the side of the government, dare I say, why would then the government fear a lawsuit due to breach in confidentiality coming from NICWAN when it's a matter of public interest? I'm pretty sure a man's death, not from natural causes, but potentially from negligence. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a private matter to me. What is with this need to defend NICWAN all of a sudden? I have no idea. And Stuart Young got another hot mic incident that the speaker didn't hear. It wasn't as bad as the last one. I'm not too sure if it went out on air. It was reported in one of the reports. Calling well, anyway, let me leave that alone. I don't know why. Why do you have to defend to the point where you're potentially acting unprofessionally, publicly, but to no discernible end to the benefit of your own party, of the opposition, but more importantly, in contradiction of your own statements? To what extent is it really good for the country? Unless you want to try to say that you know better than AG John Jeremy and the judge in this matter. Let's not forget how many things that your government tried to defend in the courts and lost. All right. Because we took that earlier break just now, we're going to go straight into today's daily review. Of course, one of the big things that happened while we didn't have any new episodes was, of course, the mid-year budget review, where the Minister of Finance, he basically came and made a presentation with regards to the current state of the economy, as well as gave a presentation with regards to the intentions of the government moving forward. Over $3 billion required, I believe it's 3.1 and change, additional expenditure to try to help deal with a situation that, to be fair to them, they found. But this situation, I have to say this, I don't know to what extent I like the minister's presentation. Because on one hand, I understand what he's saying. And the reality of where we are, I'm starting to get more and more afraid that it's worse than I thought, even though on an academic level, the details haven't changed that much. But I'm starting to fear that it's worse than I thought. Now, the minister has touted some figures which I can't necessarily confirm for myself. And this is where, you know, no man could know everything. So someone more versed in government finance matters and accounts might be able to answer those questions better than me. Although sometimes it seems as though our own academic professionals ain't that hot. But anyway. A $9 billion budget deficit. And I don't have time necessarily to get into all of the back and forth with the opposition, but I'd just like to point out to the Minister of Finance, I do believe that last year, there are reports, you have to dig for them, but last year, our deficit, the expected deficit went similarly from $5 billion to $9 billion. So, on one hand, it's not that bad, until you realize, as the minister pointed out, we've been using loans to try to finance certain things. So we have now the compounding result of all of these loans that we still have to pay off, and now we're looking to take out more loans to try and pay off this year. Or at least, I don't know to what extent, because last year I think it was something like $5 billion US in terms of loans. Well, I could be wrong. It could be less. No, sorry, not $5 billion. It was less than $5 billion, but we got a significant amount of US to cover 5 billion TT. Now, one of the things that the minister claimed, first he did point out, he kept saying a lot that a lot of the reasons why we are where we are is that the PNM willfully or knowingly allowed the economy to be mismanaged or mismanaged the economy intentionally, while allowing friends, family, and financiers, quote unquote, to benefit. Now, on the surface, that statement, there's probably truth to it. But if you want to get to some degree of accuracy now with detail, I'm not too sure if that's the best way to frame it, because it literally implies that the PNM, or rather it literally says, well, the PNM were destroying the country to benefit financiers. And I'm not entirely sure if that's completely the case. Because at the end of the day, and this is something even the PNM tried to bring up, but listen, you can't have your cake and eat it too. The external factors that are at play for the current government have been at play for a couple of years now. And to be fair to the UNC is also, you have to be fair to the PNM. But then in that case, you kind of need to not then say, oh my gosh, $9 billion deficit, the sky is falling, coming out to the opposition. That doesn't make sense to me. One of the other things that the Minister of Finance mentioned again was the $5 billion in contracts that were wrongfully awarded. I can't remember the exact phrase that he used. I'm paraphrasing it. Forgive me if that's not technically correct. I'm not entirely sure where he got that figure from, but I was grateful he didn't go on to say that means that there were $50 billion in money that we could get back somehow from the ether because of the expenditure of the last 10 years. $50 billion in contracts went down the drain. Fortunately, he didn't follow up with that. But he did say that the Auditor General's report, the report of the Auditor General, there was, in this report, he claimed, now, it wasn't entirely clear. I tried to listen to it back to get the exact phrasing and all of the context of the statement that he made, but he didn't really spend much time on the statement. That report, I believe that's the report he's referring to. I don't know if he's taking this report and the Auditor General's previous report of the year before and merging them together. But he's basically saying that there are $30 billion, I believe it is, $30 billion in money in expenditure that was unverified, could not be located, were not presented for audit, or were not placed in the vote books in 2024. Now, to be fair to the minister, if you go through the report, there are a lot of entries, ranging from millions to tens of millions to hundreds of millions, and at least in one case, 1.5 billion, I believe. But there are a lot of entries about money that could not be verified. I mean, either supporting documents were not provided to verify payments, this is with regards to 1.5 billion, or some version of that phrase was very common. I'm not entirely sure where the minister got the 30 billion from. I can't confirm it. Like, I literally can't. I don't know. Because when you look at all of the entries in the report, it doesn't seem to amount to 30 billion. I don't know if it's an estimate. I don't know what it is. And it's things like this that bother me, because when you're not clear, whether intentional or unintentional, you obfuscate the truth. Now, the cynics will say that it was intentional if they believe he's obfuscating anything. I don't necessarily want to ascribe motive at this point in time. I already have my doubts with regards to certain things, and I'll leave that there. One of the other things that the minister did mention, and I'll just say this before we close out, and I'll save the opposition's criticisms for tomorrow. One of the other things that the minister did speak about was with regards to, that I found interesting, was plans moving forward for Tobago. Because technically speaking, financially, nothing was committed more than what has been committed by the previous PDM administration. $130+ million is not the substantial increase that the THA wants to see. Granted, we're in a situation where, and I do believe when you look at some of the expenditures in actual allocations and monetary expenditures that I believe was presented, arguably, and the minister pointed out, the previous government under-budgeted. But even then, I'm not entirely sure. Education, I believe, was supposed to get $7 billion. I could be wrong. I have not a chance to double-check that. And they only spent, apparently, $6 billion plus. So to what degree, not only was the government under-budgeting, but also not exactly entirely all the allocations were given out, for whatever reason. Now, with regards to Tobago, as I was speaking, Minister Tanku did say, under the Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and he said that quite a bit, which actually made me wonder, when do the PNM people say, you know, under the leadership of the opposition leader, to acknowledge that? More on that tomorrow. We won't get into it any further today. But under the leadership of Kamala Persad-Bissessar, their Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, moving forward, the Ministry of Finance will include the MPs from Tobago and the THA when treating with or coming up with the budget allocation for the THA and for Tobago, and for developmental projects and any money spent by government ministries in Tobago, which is an interesting angle to take it, because the nuts and bolts of it was a lot of Tobago's development dollars were being controlled and spent by central government agencies, which for the THA, they didn't necessarily like that because they didn't have a say. And in some cases, like the airport, it was questionable with regards to who really had jurisdiction over projects like that, given the THA Act and the schedules. So the UNC is not necessarily committing to changing the status quo per se. All they are doing is they're saying we're going to operate within the status quo differently. Now, on one hand, that might be the most elegant solution. On the other hand, there are no guarantees being given, really. Oh, we'll consult with you. Does not mean or commit that we will do things to your liking to whatever degree you are hoping for. Also, there is the fact that, hey, if things get worse, will we be asked to tighten our situation? one of the first people to have to, get their allocations cut. And in this case, it wouldn't actually be direct allocations, but rather developmental dollars spent in Tobago. All of the money will still be controlled by central government. So if central government have an emergency, will Tobago be left hanging? To be fair though, when central government have an emergency, other parts of the country also are left hanging, right? In theory at least. And then down the road, taking this strategy, trying to work within the confines of the pre-existing system, it's an informal solution. And why I say that is, down the line, somebody could approach things differently. Because nothing formally in the structure was changed, there is no commitment to hold you to the plan moving forward. So again, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I just find it interesting that it is very non-committal. You're not committing to anything by doing it this way. Oh yes, we say that Tobago will be included. First of all, I am of the opinion I have to see it to believe it. So you could say it, I need to actually see it work for me to fully agree that it works, for me to fully believe that it's going to work as intended, as implied by the tone of delivery, by the framing of the delivery. To be fair, some of it is because of how Tobago was treated under both the last PNM administration and to some extent maybe even under the partnership. With regards to how politics is, with regards to that, that's a very strange bedfellows we have there with the UNC and the TPP because of what happened back during the partnership's time. If it wasn't for the TPP, Tobago might be essentially uncontested PNM once again, giving them a safety net, although in this case it wouldn't have mattered. A safety net that the UNC couldn't touch if things were closer. So I find that interesting. And I'll be curious to see how things move forward because Tobago is just one, and I'm going to use a term that I don't believe it's technically accurate, but I'm just using it for the sake of the conversation. Tobago is one special interest group. Obviously, it's a bit bigger, than other special interest groups, but I'm just saying. It's one special interest group that the government is now having to try to treat with on a practical level, which is a lot harder than when you're on the campaign trail and you could just give all the promises out. And one of the things with giving out all the promises is how you're going to pay for it. And I'll actually close with this. Former Minister, the Ministry of Finance, Brian Manning, was asking, are you going to dip into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund? And my whole thing about that is simply, they've been there for a couple of months. If they have to what degree can you blame them? And this is one of those weird things where the government is acting as though the UNC is mismanaging a situation that is completely their fault and is not framing their communications in order to acknowledge the harsh reality that the UNC, whether they're mismanaging the situation or not, are having to deal with a situation that they met. So to some extent, it's like you caused the fire in the house, little Jimmy. So I don't know why you complaining about what the firemen did or did not do to break down the front door in order to fight the fire. Now maybe the firemen damaged the house more than is necessary, but you started the fire, little Jimmy. So at what point do you have a license to complain? And granted, the opposition is supposed to be a check on the government. So I'm not saying that you can't complain and you have to have kids' gloves. But you need to acknowledge the fact that, A, you have some blame here directly. This ain't the UNC in opposition in 2024, where at that point, you need to stop blaming the UNC for every and anything. This is, we ain't even in 6 months yet. And you are the guys that were running the ship up until now. And it's almost like if you want to pretend as though, oh, everything was fine until, we were voted out. And then mysteriously, things went bad. Somehow, too sweet. Because I would really like to know, Just what was the TTRA supposed to do within 2 months to fix this? If you want to say moving forward, we'll be worse off without it, that's fine. First of all, make that argument by actually giving us a detailed explanation of how that's going to go. Not just you said it and we assume that what you're saying is true because you're just making a general statement that assumes that everything is going to work out how you say it. We don't know how to assess that. But exactly what was the TTRA supposed to do about this deficit? Someone please tell me. Government that had yet to implement it, what was the TTRA supposed to do about this 9 billion? I don't know. Because somehow that seems to be the silver bullet that was supposed to solve all the problems, and yet you didn't implement it. And the Prime Minister made a very specific accusation over the implementation proposals of the TTRA, of how it was being set up. I haven't necessarily seen the opposition counter that. I'm not saying the Prime Minister is saying 100% the truth. I'm saying, well, if she's not saying the truth, why can't you counter it more effectively? Let's take that break. When we come back, we'll welcome the media ambassador. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title, it's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year. Really this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2, match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3, search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of this game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
I'm back here joined by our media ambassador from the TTPS, acting ASP, Christopher Arun. No, we're not with the Minister of Finance. That's a whole other kettle of fish. ASP Arun, welcome back to Talking Point.
Yeah, good day, Sean, to you, your staff, and to your viewers.
I see you have official duties today.
Yeah, I have official meetings.
Okay.
Hopefully this today.
Now, you're here once again to talk to us. One of the things, and again, we're coming up to the end of exam season.
Yeah.
Now, school violence, ironically, it's an issue. It's an issue now, right, given what we have seen. And the police, once again, in this case, in the past we've seen where, okay, people want police involved. And I've already said, to what extent could the police add more duties to their plate? Because there's a lot of schools, right? And to try to treat with all of the students in all of the schools, because the violence isn't necessarily going to always be limited to right in front or within the school, right?
It happens in the play area, it happens in the malls, it happens in the shopping areas, it happens on the streets, it happens in public places as well as private residential areas and whatnot because of the thoroughfare of children. So you see, you need police patrols to concentrate, which the police does. They concentrate on the after-school activities that children engage in, especially at the malls and the streets and whatnot, on the side of the streets. I mean, bullying and school violence has always been a part of society ever since. It's just that it's a lot larger, the issues are a lot larger now.
To some extent, right? Usually, I engage in wrongdoing and I'm easily identifiable.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing for me, right?
Right.
One would think.
Yeah.
And students wearing school uniforms,
Yeah.
so whether it's within school, in the vicinity of school, or even on the way home from school, as you said,
Yeah.
because they're in transit after school,
Right.
They might be involved, they might go to, well, I don't know if they have an arcade anymore, because in the past,
Yeah.
before the internet was so accessible, you would have to go to certain locations,
Right.
whether the mall or whether certain shops, and young people congregate to play video games and what have you, right? And there might be similar establishments now where they might spend a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
But the point is, whether it's the mall, whether it's movie town or whatever, if it's after school, they're in uniform, it should be relatively easy or easier to track them down.
Yeah.
And yet there's still, is it that students don't actually realize that the severity of what they're doing, and they're kind of taking it for granted? Oh, I'm a child and I'm just beating on another child, and so what are you going to do to me?
Yeah, that is sometimes the normal thinking method of children. Studies have shown that children don't develop, their brain activity doesn't develop 100% until the age of 25. So even adults who we consider adults aren't fully developed mentally to think like a mature person should think. Other than that, you do see some children very mature thinking, and they do not understand at times, because we have as a task force officer, as an officer on the ground, I've often had times to intervene in school violence, because you would be passing and you would see the fights and whatnot, and we'd have to engage the children and separate them and take them into custody and hand over to parents and whatnot. And in some cases, charge kids where we're supposed to charge them. And they often don't understand the ramifications or the consequences of their actions. It seems to be a very jolted action by them on how they treat with each other. So it's a school fight. Now, they are normally recognized and identified by the victim or the person they're victimizing. And it's easy to capture them later on. However, they don't seem to understand the ramifications of the fighting and the assault and the robberies and the bullying as
the consequences.
They don't understand the consequences.
Because I've seen every now and then it comes up, some teenager, maybe it could have been reckless driving or some other cause, right?
Yeah.
And essentially they get convicted for murder.
Right.
Right? And they're like, I'm going to get off or whatever, and they all smiles.
Right.
And literally they're smiling and the verdict is being read, and maybe I potentially, I don't know if the judge determines the, oh gosh, what's the word? Sentence yet, right? Or maybe it is at sentencing. And, it's almost like if reality finally slaps him or her in the face.
Yeah.
Like, what is it about that? Is it, that's in the States. Locally, could our crime situation, we kind of, just based on the news media, right? Because obviously the actual accurate truth, not all of it is going to be within the news, but just based on how things are, is it that our young people just think that, well, we could probably get away with whatever because of how things are? Or is it something when young people where they really, as you said, they don't mature until 25, which is kind of crazy because, soldiers are recruited a lot younger than that, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And it's just one of those things with development of our young people that we ourselves have not fully understood the implication of, where, we have this phenomenon where they are not fully mature, but they are making these severe decisions, and we've kind of maybe dropped the ball.
Yeah, well, thankfully, in Trinidad, we've not really seen psychopathic tendencies with children that, that they go to the extreme, as in such cases, like how they murder and and mayhem and that kind of thing. You do see, it does happen. It does happen on and off. There are situations.
When you say tendencies, is it that they're actually full-out psychopaths, or is it that it's just because they're ignorant, they're unaware, And when they are made aware, then, you know, the emotions kind of catch up.
Yeah, the second one.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
Exactly. So you don't see the tendency to be totally and totally psychopathic. You don't see that coming out and murdering people just like that. You see the involvement, the recruitment, you see the indulgement, you see that they are coerced and they're advised and they're brought into the realm of criminality from an early age, and then, you know, the consequences dawn on them later on, yes. But thankfully
it kind of normalizes.
Yeah. But thankfully the justice system has been using the authority to really properly rehabilitate these children through YTC and the other avenues that they have. They probably need more teeth though. They probably need more avenues, the judiciary of course, to address school violence and these, how to treat with children and rehabilitate them better. So like the military, one of the things that could be considered is mandatory military training, mandatory involvement in what they call the program, the MUS program.
I think
MILAT program and whatnot, yeah.
Now, the commissioner did say in his, I believe it was his opening speech, right, in the handover ceremony, he was talking to parents. He's saying, look, if you're not going to parent the kids, we're going to intervene, right? I can't remember the exact word. So he's taking it in front now.
Yeah. The police service, the TTPS, has traditionally policed school violence, policed schools by the use of, especially the use of community policing section, the clubs. And we've seen a lot of progress and fruit in using that policing method. And it is something that most likely the commissioner might continue to use. And when he used the term, I believe the term he used was confinement, it doesn't necessarily mean arrest. It could mean arrest. It doesn't mean you will be arrested and whatnot. But it does mean you will be treated. The message I got from him is that it will be treated. To what extent, I think, and we've always encouraged, as the Special Victims Department, at the TTPS, we've always encouraged parents that where criminal offenses have occurred, to pursue charges. Because then it goes before the proper courts, it goes before the children's court. And the judiciary does use proper avenues to rehabilitate children.
Basically, if your child breaks the law, don't try. If you protect them, you might actually be harming them in the long run. Because you're protecting really bad behavior and indirectly encouraging it.
And they could be rehabilitated. They can be treated properly. The courts does, especially when it comes to children, they do not take such a severe stance or severe sentence on children as you would think, like you see in the movies and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like we have, like you said, we don't have children murdering other people.
We don't have school shootings.
Yeah, we're not going to those extremes. So the penalties right now for what is being done.
Right. I just think, from my perspective, that the judiciary may need more teeth in the sense of mandatory military locations to send, or schools to send
programs
them.
like
programs, correct.
Yeah.
That's it too. Because you want to be able to police them better and whatnot.
Because part of it is, as you pointed out, you have criminal elements influencing the young people.
Yeah.
To what extent, and maybe parents, I don't know if it's because they're ashamed, they don't want to admit it, or they just don't know.
Yeah.
There comes a point where parents might not be equipped to deal with the fact that a gangster is trying to influence your son.
Listen, and it's a usual occurrence. Parents do come to the police station and they invoke the police, they involve the police, they ask the police for a lot of assistance because they have issues with children, because there are parents who recognize the issues early, that your child is being recruited or being advised or being counseled by these criminal elements in the society, in the neighborhood, and they don't know what to do. They are their wits end. And most of the times it's a single parent situation.
Right, of course.
Right, and what they do, and I see it both with single mothers and fathers, right? And they come to you as police officers in society, in your community, and in the police station, and they say, listen, we don't know what to do. And I've oftentimes had to direct them to the police youth clubs, because these clubs have some heavy investment by members of the business communities. and they are able, because of this, they are able to carry these children places, take care of them, counsel them, talk to them, and get them involved, get them off the streets and into some kind of activities. I remember long ago, there was little, when I say long ago, I'm talking about probably about 30 years ago or more, that you'd hardly had avenues for children to get involved in. And now with the rise, not the dawn, but the rise in technology and the internet and whatnot, and the involvement of kids online or devices, it's more difficult to get them involved in community groups and projects and whatnot.
And now that, you know, the July-August vacation is coming up, there would be programs being run by the police youth clubs. So it's not just the regular stuff. There would be summer programs where they would have the kids, you know, for extended time.
At the transport branch where I work, we actually provide transportation via maxis and buses for these police youth clubs and take them to these, what they call excursions and community group meetings and whatnot.
I remember one run by, I can't remember if it's Inspector Chabady.
Chabady, yeah.
Right, and not only was it a program for, I think it lasted a couple of weeks but it was capped by a week-long excursion to Tobago.
Right.
And it wasn't even, you know, that expensive. And it included a reasonable setup with regards to travel, stay, activities, what have you. And, you know, again, this is one of those things that you're not getting any kind of reports of any funny business going on. This is a highly reputable, well-run, very efficient youth club, right? That has a lot of good offerings. I think the parent at the time, the only thing was just to send the child by himself to Tobago. It wasn't the club itself. He was like, the club is great. I love what the club is doing. You know, the travel part on his own, that may be, you know, and as all responsible parents should at least consider. Now, just going back, I want to reiterate the point again, because you mentioned, you know, if your child breaks the law, parents need to understand. And with single parents, I think the thing is, look, you know, you have more demands on your time, and it's just harder to keep up with everything.
Right? And there are avenues for parents to seek assistance.
But if your child breaks the law, just to reiterate the point, don't be afraid to let the authorities be involved.
Exactly.
Because you could potentially head off the situation worsening.
Yeah, it does. It does happen. I've actually seen school violence, children involved in school violence, lead to a life of crime and get involved in criminality.
Right, and at that point, the punishments initially, it'll be for kids, it won't be that bad, the courts will take a lot of factors in.
Exactly.
But if it gets too far down the line, and they become essentially career criminals, whether they become career criminals at 18,
then
19,
they'll
20.
have the rest of the TTPS to deal with.
And it will be a lot more severe.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so with that said, we have Digger Martin on the line. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller, you're on here.
Good morning, Mr. Small and ASP Arun.
Good morning.
Sir, you're wearing your badge on your sternum. What a sign. Excellent, excellent, excellent. A couple of issues. Let me deal with youth clubs. I need to know what are the metrics involved in the success of the school, the youth clubs. Because having 1, 2, 3, 4 youth clubs and there's a proliferation all over the place doesn't serve me as a citizen. I believe the youth club was to mitigate crime. And what are the metrics to show that forming youth clubs, using police as scarce resource, intelligent police as scarce resource to manage those things? You have to show me where it has and what it has done to mitigate crime. You have to come up with some metrics if you continue to promote that. The second issue I want, and this is 2 news items recently on the newspaper. One has to do with an alleged homicide, suicide in the prison, where the guy apparently, it is alleged, hung himself and his hands were tied behind his back. I don't know how those two could be the same. But what is more important and frightening, on another news show, not beyond the tape, not the police thing, was the other crime fighter, where he was interviewing the wife of that prisoner. And what she said, she has been buying a phone card for him, and he has been calling regularly home. So for that to happen, that tells me something is definitely wrong with how we're mitigating against crime. That's all over the place. And that's an easy one to resolve. Just get hold of that phone and you see where it's coming from and who are the calls and who involved. Because we had a frightening thing 2 days ago where they basically empty a FUL on a prison officer who did his work and was going home. So that is two. The other one is for Sean. Sean, you will like this one. You know there's a term, eater food lawyers?
Yeah.
I saw the former Minister of Finance basically got away from going before the Privilege Committee because he was saying something in Parliament with respect to an issue he had with the acting BRI chairman, that is Rouhani something Ramkissoon. And what he said, he was in the debate, he was saying sub judice, and they caught him with his pants down. And he came back, I think the next day or some other time within the debate to say the lawyers were at fault. The lawyers didn't advise him that they dismissed his appeal. So two things here. How unprofessional are those lawyers to not basically advising the Ministry of Finance and by extension the minister? Are they eater food lawyers? Are we going to pay those lawyers? Because the Ministry of Finance, and I think because they're coming out from Imbert's pocket, or the taxpayers had to pay a couple of thousands of dollars. So are we, I'm hoping that the AG investigate that case and don't pay that if he is throwing the lawyers under the bus for that. But you know what is more interesting? The earlier case, when he lost in the lower court, the law firm that represents him is one of the most senior and most recognizable law firm. And I'm going to give you the initial of that law firm, MD. You could think, and he's a popular columnist. My thing is, I'm hoping that it is not him that did the appeal for the former finance minister. And that is all I am to say. Eater food lawyers, where we are with them. I will give somebody else a chance because I want to come back at the new boss in the Police Service Commission. And I believe he has questions to answer with respect to the marijuana in the former Prime Minister's residence. He apparently did an investigation. The PCA say a lot of policemen involved in that has questions to answer, and nothing has become, just like the day of policing. I'll go on. Have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. I'll just say this. I find it very interesting that for whatever reason, lawyers working for the government in the last 5 years, I can't say speak more than that, right? I can only speak to, so maybe even less than 5 years. They just don't seem to be that quite proficient in their job. So whenever, you know, a former minister or minister says, you know, I have to consult with the lawyers, I'm like, I don't know if the advice you're getting is worth the money that you're paying for it, you know? Although at least in one case with the Auditor General situation that went to the Privy Council, apparently the then minister was advised not to go to the Privy Council because he would lose, and he went anyway. So to what extent is it really under the advice of the lawyers, and to what extent is it that the lawyers advise you multiple courses of actions and you kind of pick and choose what you think is sound logic? Eater food lawyers, maybe though, because again, I'm yet to be impressed by anything that came with the caveat on the advice of the lawyers for X, Y, and Z. I've yet to be impressed by anything said with that caveat attached to it, so by the government, right? We have to wait and see how this government works out, because maybe it is just a thing where it's a hard job. You know, not every lawyer is going to be right all the time on complicated matters like this. But hey, if under the new administration we see all of a sudden the lawyers hired seem to be a bit more knowledgeable, then maybe hindsight will show us something. Now, with regards to what the other things that the caller...
Well, let me just see, I mean, historically, community-oriented policing has been a tool used as a theory that police officers and police departments have been using around the world to fight crime.
Yeah, I mean, are there direct statistics? Because
there would be. I wouldn't have those direct statistics.
Because I think it's kind of hard, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're counting arrests.
No, but
you're trying to prove a lack of crime is attributed to something.
Right, but traditionally and historically it has shown that the involvement of community policing officers in the communities and especially with the youth clubs has proven to have less than fewer children involved in crime as opposed to if they weren't involved in the community.
Right, that's one of the things that you can choose though. How many children are subscribed to the programs?
And then
how many children
so you would have a lot of children
commit a crime and rule breaking.
Yeah, some of these youth clubs have hundreds of children and whatnot involved in these.
And I guess one of the things perhaps that would help the situation is if the organizers of these programs could say, well, we've had this number of children, and then this is actually not as accurate as you would think. How many of them are either rehabilitated, however you want to define that, or how many successfully do not engage in criminal activity or rule breaking?
Yeah, or the potential to engage in criminal activity.
The reason why it's not so clear cut is
it's hard to qualify.
The youth clubs might not be the only influence.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So to what extent now, because the problem might be that severe that the youth clubs could only have a limited impact.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the real things that makes the statistics difficult is community policing and stuff and those types of initiatives. I always thought of them as long-term initiatives. You're not removing criminals on the street if you're talking to the school-age children of today.
Right.
That's for the criminals of tomorrow. The criminals of today, 19 to 25, 19 to 30.
No. It's a more direct approach here.
It needs a more direct approach to meet with now.
Yeah.
So I'm not wrong with that, with that assumption, right?
Yeah, and you spoke about cell phone, somebody getting access.
In the prison service, yeah.
But that's an issue. I mean, it happens across the world.
True.
You know, it's something that the prison service has to look a little more closely at.
I am sure the caller will then call in next week and say, yes, but what we see happening in our prisons at times, I have heard of worse cases in America, right, to be fair.
To be fair,
but what we've seen is kind of like, this is not the kind of stuff that the public is supposed to so easily get wind of.
Yeah.
It's that blatant.
Yeah, it does happen. I mean, and we have cases coming out of the prisons where they would actually extort money from other individuals and
other prisoners.
I know they actually call civilians like elderly people and threaten them with crime if they don't send phone calls and whatnot to them.
For the prisoners to have.
Yeah.
Hey, he's not in the prison service, so just understand, right? We have Sanfran on the line. We'll take the call. We have some comments to get through. We'll get to the comments after the call.
Did we address the caller's issues?
Some of them, but we do have to get to the next call, though.
Sorry.
So, Sanfran, good morning. You on the air?
Good morning, Sean. Morning, SPR.
Good day.
Morning.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Good day.
Yeah, okay. You know, Sean, I listened to your opening salvos this morning. Yeah, let me first talk about that prison service. In the prison service, there are two sets of two entities. There are prison officers, and there are prisoners or incarcerated people or detained people. And these things that are happening that you talk about, the extortion, the phone calls, the protection racket that runs in the prison, could not happen if the prison officers were doing their jobs. And that's the be-all and end-all of this thing. I remember with Gerald Hines, and they say they get jammers in the prison, but things still happening. They're still getting phones in prison, phone calls. How those things are getting in there? Okay, we saw the issue recently with the guy throwing the package over the wall at at Frederick Street jail there. But this has not been happening now, you know, Sean. This is a long-standing problem in the prison service. A long-standing problem. Hence the reason why over the last 20 years you see so many officers being murdered, prison officers. And this is one of the spotlights I think the state has to work on in terms of how they trying to weed out the corruption in the prison officers part of this equation. That being said, I'll listen to you, Sean, after that talk about the new commissioner of police and it's this Newsday article that you read. And I don't like the stance you took this morning.
Okay.
And let me say why. You made a set of assumptions about the or should I say assumptions, boy? You made some comments on the new commissioner of police there, and a lot of it is supposition. I think when we have these organizations and we have new blood in the organization, Sean, I think we should give them the benefit of the doubt and frame what we say about them in a different light. This new commissioner comes in there with some accolades and in a specific area, and you can't just go off of one article and what one article didn't say about him to make those comments about to make those suppositions about what he might do and what he might not do. Yes, he has a mountain to climb. We know all the issues with crime, with corruption within the police service, with criminal activity, with drug trafficking. However, the only thing we have to do as a population is support right now. Because if we don't support, we could support and suggest, and if it is that it comes to criticizing, we do that. But I don't think from the get-go, putting these barriers in front of the commissioner is anything that the population should be doing right now. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. I will say this. I think I was more answering the report than trying to necessarily make a definitive statement on the commissioner, because I did say it was based on what was said, right? And the issue that I had was what was said is very positive for the commissioner, because you're saying we should give him a chance. But I'm also saying we should not be quick to say, oh, look, good press, he's the right man for the job, hooray. What I was saying was, no, what was said about him does not necessarily speak to what I think are the more key fundamental areas that needs to be addressed. He has a good track record, but the good track record didn't do anything with regards to that. So there's a lot of unknowns there. And I hate to say this because you might not like what I'm going to say next. I get it. You want to support to try to be constructive and move forward. And there's a lot of important and rightful thinking with regards to that. But I also have we're in a hole. It's not of his making. It's not his fault. But this is very dissimilar to the situation the PNM finds themselves in. Because again, it's not his fault. But I guess it's like the current government. You know, they find themselves in a hole not of their making as well. When you're in the hole, we don't have the luxury of if this was any other Tuesday and we have all the time that we would normally have. Things are a bit more immediate and urgent in our needs. So I'm not necessarily willing to say, well, you know, we'll give him some time and see what the kid could do, because this isn't Ed Sheeran, you know, popping out in trying to sing to a different demographic and hoping that the crowd doesn't lambast him as the Jamie Foxx story over his first public appearance was. Not everybody will get that reference, but that's okay. So with regards to the new commissioner, the accolades are impressive, but I was to some extent trying to pour some cold water over the reporting or what was reported and try to give it a more realistic lens. Because ironically, I'm not saying that he's going to be like Ayla, but I do remember we had a similar difference of opinion with Ayla. And I'm not looking to say it's the same thing and I'm going to say I told you so when it's all over. I'm actually hoping this new commissioner will show us something.
Yeah.
But my point is he has to show us something. And if the media is going to have a report that's going to give him some positive spin, I'm going to comment on that positive spin and put what I think are more realistic expectations in that he hasn't shown us anything yet on certain areas that generally everybody thinks are the immediate obvious things that we want to see if we want to see any major differences. That might be too negative for some, and I get that because, like I said, I acknowledge the fact there's a lot of value with your stance. But because of the immediate needs, I don't know if I'll share those stances. Now, and then there's, in fact, I'll just say it, I think prison service corruption is perceived by the population as worse than police corruption. I don't know if you could eliminate everything that happens in the prisons with regards to the law breaking. But to some extent, whatever exists will exist to some degree, even the minimal amount of it that you might not be able to eliminate because prison officers potentially are involved. It's very hard for any rule breaking to happen in a prison that's substantial without prison officers involved.
The commissioner did, in his speech on that Friday, spoke about integrity and whatnot, and even in the prison service, there's a level of integrity amongst officers that may or may not come into question as well as the police service, and hopefully, that, and it's a difficult task. I don't sit and feel that being a prison officer is easy at all, because as we saw recently, our thoughts and prayers go to the officer. Hopefully he's still alive. I wasn't aware of any updates as to his condition. And you're seeing that they face the brunt of what emanates from inside the prison service. Inside the prisons, where their lives are always at risk. And hopefully they would be able to overcome this. I don't know how. It's very, very difficult in a country this small, where you don't have overlapping agencies, as we were speaking about before.
To be a check and balance.
A check and balance, because then, it have varying levels of policing that would keep other policing units in check and that kind of
Because
thing.
the complaint is the TTPS investigates the TTPS.
Exactly, yeah.
When the soldier had the accident, the army kind of investigated him.
Right.
When the prison service, one would imagine it's the prison service that looks into the prison service.
And the prison service has to police their own officers coming into the prison, allegedly with banned items and whatnot.
But just to put things in perspective, I think we're not saying that the entire service is corrupt.
No.
But rather, and I think this is more severe in the prison service than in any other service, the bad apples undermine the good ones.
Yeah, but I don't know if reports go there, but there are a lot of reports where prison officers are being held with banned items, including cigarettes.
So they are catching it.
They are catching some of it.
But my point is, you could be the greatest Boy Scouts in all the world.
Yeah.
They'll just wait for someone else's shift to do it, and then they just won't do it under your watch.
And Trinidad being so small, one of the issues is it's easy to target prison officers in society because you know who they are.
And you could compromise them through their family as
well.
well.
I think there was the recent case, not the recent case, and in the past 2 years, where the prison officer was holding his child's hand. And he got gunned down with his child. And it's because he's a marked person. He's out in the open public area. I believe he was unarmed, or they are unarmed and whatnot. So,
yes.
So their lives at risk because they are known as police officers working in a prison that are housed by a lot of people that are not allegedly innocent.
I mean, this is one reason why you see
guilty.
In Latin America, prison officers wearing balaclavas. I don't know if that's something.
Yeah, that's something they could probably look at. You don't know who the prison officers are.
But again, you could have all the security measures in the world, and it will be undermined by the bad apples. And if you can't get, and that's the thing, the bad apples might be in the minority. I believe at least in the police service, it's the minority.
Yeah.
In the prison service, I don't have a way to gauge. But the point is, even if it is a very small minority, that is enough to undermine both the procedures of the prison service, the security of the members of the prison service, and so on and so on. So it's just one of those really uphill battles. And I mean, the leadership challenge is, it's not just to get a good leader. Perhaps our problem is we need great leaders across the board.
Yeah.
Will the commissioner be a great leader? I don't know. I've seen some good things. But not enough to say yes or no.
I just wanted to comment on over the weekend. Of course, as a senior officer, we have duties to perform. So I was out on visits and inspections over the long holiday. You had your rest. I had to work. And
to be fair, my job started last night, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's just okay.
Mine's there as
well. But yes, and, okay, yes.
So I went to the K9 branch, and at the K9 branch, it was after midnight, and the officers were coming in off exercise duties. And I wanted to openly commend the officers who worked very hard over this 4-day long weekend. And they were able to target and apprehend offenders with narcotics over the weekend. I think one was in St. James, where they got a few 100 grams of marijuana. This is using the K9 unit. You know it's the K9 unit, the dogs.
Yeah.
And then in Central, I think they got 100 grams. I'm not too 100% about the figures. They did report it. I just didn't take a proper mental note of it. And they also indicated that they arrested a Venezuelan national in a bar with cocaine. Yeah. So I just want to commend the officers for doing such an excellent job over it. We saw roadblocks. We saw them in the hot sun and the pouring rain conducting roadblocks. We saw them on exercise executing warrants, conducting searches and whatnot. So I just wanted to openly commend them. I mean, we don't do that enough.
And folks, just because we holiday don't mean you can't get arrested, huh? You know, some people think. We have some comments to get through before we close show, so we go to the comments. Let's go with the last comment first, because we were just speaking about that, if possible. Good morning, great program. Our school children need police to go into school to lecture them for those types of violence. Thanks to the officer, you all should go in schools once a month. Now, to some extent, do you all go in schools to talk?
We often do. There are a number of outreach programs that are conducted by police officers and even the army and whatnot, where they go in with civilian wear and they lecture to the students.
But I would say this. If your thinking was you're just going to school, lecture once a month and that's enough, I would say no. More the kids need like a stable engagement, consistency.
It has to be engaging.
And the youth clubs is one means of doing that.
That is one means, but the community-oriented policing officers, as well as the Special Victims Department, do go into schools very often. And I've actually seen, when I was at the Special Victims Department, Tobago had a school program where they assigned 2 or 3 officers. It wasn't such a big unit, but nonetheless, they assigned 2 or 3 officers, and they used to visit schools. That was their job every day, to visit schools, especially the schools that were high risk of having bullying and school violence. And we did see a drop in the amount of school violence emanating from those schools. We did see, because the police officers knew who to target. And when I say target, I mean the regular bullies, the ones who to intervene and who to address and whatnot. And this led to less school violence emanating out of Tobago. I must say it was an excellent program.
And hopefully that also meant less young people growing up to be hardened criminals.
Yeah, I love Tobago culture. They actually police themselves as opposed to Trinidad, where you need the police out there.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, crime is relatively low compared to certain other parts of the country. Yeah. Let's go with the second to last comment with regards to nuclear weapons there. I want to get to this first. What is the rationale why Israel can possess nuclear bombs but Iran can't? Israel can commit genocide, carry out terrorist acts since its inception, but Iran's seen as a threat. The U.S. did not attack North Korea because North Korea possesses nuclear bombs. Moreover, Iran does not have to develop nuclear bombs, as they can always get them from their allies in North Korea, Russia, and China. Well, I think that last part kind of to some extent answers the first part. If they were so worthy of having nuclear weapons, why hasn't Russia or China given them one already? If they so need it. And again, therein, like, I know what Putin may have said to Trump over Trump's involvement, over America's involvement, right? But Russia hasn't done it. Russia hasn't helped them per se, to some extent at least, nor has China to some extent at least. So why not? They have so many, especially Russia. One being given to Iran, or 10 being given to Iran, or 20 being given to Iran, ain't gonna do much for Russia's nuclear deterrence. They have that many warheads, right? Let's understand that. So at least at some point, somebody in the Kremlin, somebody in Beijing said, I don't know if we really want to encourage this with Iran. Why could Israel have it? Because they developed it for themselves before anybody could do anything about it. And they have thus far proven that they are not recklessly going to use it. Because if they really wanted to commit genocide, they could just push the button. Let's go with the comment just before this one, which I find this is a throwback to back in the, I don't know if you remember, this was one of those things, I think like somebody had like a special on Nostradamus from the States and it made it on local TV when I was a child. Yeah. And I was like, I mean, and then of course 9/11 happened, so that's another thing. Yeah. So is there anything relevant in the quatrains about World War III? Here's the thing. The quatrains, if one interprets the quatrains, one would have thought World War III would have happened back in 1999. We're in 2025. Right? Like to some extent, the book of Revelations, if you want to loosely interpret it, could be applied at multiple times throughout human history, because what we don't appreciate and we take for granted, we know ancient Rome eventually was a society that was destroyed, right? You know, the city is still there, the people to some extent are still there, but the society is destroyed. We think of Revelations as this big thing and the real biblical stuff, and we don't understand that throughout human history, societies have collapsed, and for all intents and purposes, for those people, the world ended. So Revelations could be interpreted and applied on loose interpretations for multiple times throughout human history, and same thing with Nostradamus' quatrains, with regards to who is the Antichrist, and who's the beast, and who's the this, and who's the that. Right? That's why, you know, to some extent, to what degree did he predict 9/11, and to what degree someone saw some things that looked like you could interpret them as 9/11 and said, ah, well, that. And then maybe in about 20 to 50 years, some of those same passages might be applied to something else. I don't know. I don't know. If Nostradamus was so capable, if prescience was a thing, we would have less tragedy because we would see them coming in advance, right? But for some reason, things take us by surprise more often than not. Last one, this is a more practical comment, and this is at the top of the show, so I apologize for taking so long to get to it. Also, can something be done about manholes that are filled with debris? I was walking on Farm Road, St. Joseph, close to the corner where Ministry of Agriculture is. The manholes are filled there also by Conform Road and SMR, I don't know what. There is garbage stuck in the manhole. Can this be referred to the relevant ministry so that other manholes can be cleared to stop the flooding? Thanks. Well, I guess yes. I assume it's because of the flooding, so it's just one of those things where hopefully one would think this is what CPAP is for. If not ministry teams or local government teams, and this might actually be a local government function, on the cleanup for the aftermath, right? So this is one of those things where ironically you're saying police-wise we're limited. But with regards to things like cleaning up drains and stuff, we have like multiple jurisdictions here. And the public still complaining about work to be done. Maybe it's because with the weekend there was a lot of work to be done.
You notice a lot of garbage, all the rainfall, you notice a lot of garbage coming along the river banks and whatnot.
Well, that goes to be fair to what the Minister of Local Government was saying.
Not debris.
Garbage, and what the Minister of Works was saying. Because I do believe that the reason why there's so much garbage for the rain to pick up. Now, granted, if something floods, yes, a garbage can could flood out, right?
Yeah.
But I think a good amount of it is because we litter.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Right? And then, of course, we get what we get. Right? And to be fair, this is not the Minister of Works saying this after the fact. Oh, well, I see debris, litter. No, they were saying it in advance. Let's just be fair. Right? And now the key is, I mean, I guess this is one of those things, right? If the TTPS starts arresting people for littering now, you think they will complain?
I'm nearly arrested persons for littering already, though. I had to warn them. Right in front of you, they would just throw garbage.
Just right in front of you?
Right in front of you.
Were you in uniform?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Folks, that's how bad it is.
And you had to warn. I mean, I don't want to arrest somebody for. I didn't want to arrest somebody for littering, but.
But you know, the sad part is they know that, and that's one of the reasons why people do it.
I don't think members of the public knows that it's illegal to litter.
No. They know that you can, right? I just think they take it for granted. They're not going to arrest me for littering. When there's murderers out in the street, you arresting me for littering. That mentality of entitlement bothers me.
Yeah, I think if the police service used to concentrate on the very little crimes like these, it would seem petty and whatnot. Maybe it might have influence, you know. Maybe it might have gone better.
Maybe. Because small rule breaking leads to large rule breaking.
It's illegal to wash your own car on the government road in front of your own house. Maybe
oh gosh,
you could be
then
arrested.
up St. Anne's. Right? All right, but with that said, folks, we're over time, so I want to thank ASP Arun for joining me once again in its full, well, dress greens.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Dress khakis.
Khaki, yeah.
Well, it looks.
Bush jacket.
It looks a little more green than khaki.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess for those that had khaki pants in school and then, you know, one of them just didn't look quite as khaki as it should. It is what it is. Thanks to the commenters for commentating. Interesting takes. I understand that there's a lot of stress with regards to what's going on in the Middle East, but I would caution you and say, no. That, in my opinion, there's less stress with regards to that as compared to our own internal problems. Maybe we should try to solve our own internal problems before we start to consider about what other people should do with their problems.
I hope it'll reach home, man. I hope it'll come closer.
What, the war?
Yeah.
Nah, nah.
Let's hope so.
If it escalates, it's not because of what happened, but rather it's because of something bigger.
Okay.
At least in my opinion. With that said, have a good day, folks. Hopefully, be safe out there, even with all the rain, right? Remember to be a bird's keeper. So with that, remember your allegiance to the Republic, but also to each other. And never forget that it's nice to be nice. So don't drop trash right in front of a police officer because he's trying to be nice. You should be nice too, and just refrain from that. I am the only sucker that keeps the trash in his car and then takes it and throws it away at his house. And you know, it's like going through all these extra steps. Anyway, right? It's nice to be nice. So be nice to the environment so we could be nice for each other so we could see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private healthcare affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.